let's go ahead and begin.
Okay, say the prayer. Will y'all do the prayer?
Why don't we go ahead and get this meeting started? We'll call to order the full Governmental Affairs Committee. And I broke tradition last meeting and forgot, but I won't do it this time. I'd ask Representative Brockway to open up in a word of prayer, please.
All right, let's pray. Father, we come before you and we pray for this committee meeting. Pray that you would give each of us wisdom and guidance and as we work toward the betterment of our state, and pray that the things we do here would bring glory and honor to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you very much. Why don't Representative Chokas, won't you come forward? We'll hear House Bill 290 that we was voted on unanimously out of subcommittee earlier. Go right ahead, Representative Chokas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Catch your breath first.
Yeah, thank you. I just ran from 341. We're hearing the Governor's Hope Scholarship Committee, and I thank you all for indulging my limit of time and allowing me to go first. Thank you very much.
Glad to accommodate.
Members of the committee, Mr. Chairman, again, I bring forth before you House Bill 290. And this bill, even though I'm carrying it, it's been signed by the entire Information and Audits Committee. To give you a brief history on the purpose of the bill, is several years ago there was an abuse of the purchase cards by different departments within state government. And at that time we not only did we correct that with legislation, but we also prosecuted several of those cases successfully, I might add, and restitution was paid or jail time, and I can't remember the outcomes. But anyway, in our working with the Information and Audits Committee, we receive financial audits and performance audits, and in addressing the performance audits, we discovered that authorities were left out of the initial legislation. And so we crafted this legislation, House Bill 290, to include authorities such as the Port Authority and the World Congress Center to report their financial information and audits to the Information and Audits Committee. As a matter of fact, the Department of Audits, that was their number one request for us to do so that we could put complete control over the purchase cards that are issued by the state of Georgia. That basically is the legislation. On line 16, it was changed to define divisions, agency, departments, bureaus, commissions, authorities, public corporations. So that should include every aspect of state government that uses the state P card. With that, sir, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Chokas. Any questions of the author from any committee members? What's your number? You need to push the button when you wish to speak, please. All right, go ahead, Representative.
Representative Chokas, line 54 through 56. Agencies shall review not less than annually all purchasing cards issued to their employees and shall eliminate purchasing cards for employees who demonstrate consistently low usage for such purchasing cards. Is just from a business perspective, we don't want to do anything that would sort of encourage someone to incur, quite frankly, unnecessary expenditures just in the attempt to hold on to the card.
I understand your
question
point.
there.
I'm sorry. What's the? Isn't it true? I'm just trying to get the. I'm trying to understand the logic behind that.
Okay. If I understand completely, and the reason for the purchase cards, P cards, is so that the different agencies and departments can make the appropriate purchases. All right, and I'm just going to use the example within the university system because that may be more easily definable. The controller of the university system would be ultimately responsible for those cards, but they may issue some of those cards to department heads for purchases for different things. I'm not sure exactly the specifics, but I would imagine that some of those department heads, if they have low purchases, they may need it once or twice a year. I imagine, and I mean, I'm just kind of guessing as to the need for that.
It was just a general question. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go right ahead, Representative Bearden. Chairman Bearden.
I'd like to make a motion that we give a due pass recommendation to House Bill 290 LC number 352091.
We have a motion on House Bill 290. Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion and second on House Bill 290 LC 352091. Any discussion on this? If no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Send this on to rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. Thank you, members of the committee. I appreciate your support.
My pleasure. Let me go ahead and I'm going to bring before you a measure that's passed out of subcommittee earlier in the year. That's House Bill 80. You have it in the committee substitute. You should have it in your folder there, LC 285456S. And this is a bill that passed subcommittee. It basically repeals Article 6, which has to do with the unincorporated islands, and it had a provision in there that allowed for the incorporation of unincorporated islands with no other approval necessary. We repealed that Article 6, but in the article it contained a definition for unincorporated islands, so we've since put that definition back in there. You'll see that starting there on line 18. And you'll also see that the committee sub had a effective date of January 1st, 2013, so this gives, from today's date, a good 18 to 20 months for any municipality that has any existing unincorporated islands, the ability to incorporate them under this original provision. And of course, even after January 1st of 2013, they still have the ability to annex that property, but in that particular situation, they would have to go through the normal annexation process. And so I just want to offer this up as a committee sub and would ask for your favorable consideration on this particular bill.
Make another motion.
Chairman Bearden.
Make a motion that we do pass recommendation to the substitute to House Bill 80 LC 285456S.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? A second. We have a motion and a second on House Bill 80 LC 285456S. Are there any discussion or questions? None. Hearing none. All those in favor of this passage, let it be signified by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Measure carries unanimously. Goes on to rules. Thank you very much. Why don't we have Representative Setzler bring before, if you're ready, Representative Setzler, House Resolution 153.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you House Resolution 153. This is a study committee resolution that recognizes the complex set of circumstances associated with the balance between federal powers and state powers. Earlier in the session, some members of House leadership and I were talking about, the maintaining the balance. Have we? So it was sort of a philosophical discussion about what functions of government should be state functions, what functions of government should be federal functions, and out of that, arose a recognition that Georgia needed to begin to explore if we're ever going to systematically restore what the legislature and the people of Georgia might believe to be a more appropriate balance. It would take a very careful process to do that. Over the last 10 years, there's been a recognition with the expansion of federal government spending and education policy, where because of the offering of federal dollars or the threat of withholding federal dollars, in essence, federal policy, education policy with respect to accountability for teachers, school systems have largely become directed from Washington. Again, because of the power of the purse. Again, there's become a recognition that perhaps the balance intended by our framers is a little out of kilter. I think that would be an understatement for some in our communities. Others in our communities would argue it's as it should be. But if we as a state are going to begin to take on the issue of recognizing that our framers had intended a compound republic where the states had sovereignty in their sphere of influence and the federal government had sovereignty and direct responsibility within their enumerated powers, we need to be very careful about how we do that. Mr. Chairman, I would offer to you there's some members who've considered some propositions for this session, and I would just submit it's the desire of our leadership and many of our members that we be very careful about how we do that, but that there is a need to pursue an understanding of potential state actions that can restore that balance on a broad number of issues, perhaps a more limited number of issues through either legislative action or executive branch action. And this resolution simply would establish a study commission to deliberately over the interim study that and consider, are there things we as a state would need to consider and should consider to restore the balance in a way that's more constitutionally appropriate. Be subject to questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Before I ask for questions, I'd like to just officially make a statement that when I was asked to both hear this piece of legislation as well as sign it, which I did, I appreciate the way that Representative Setzler went about it, because I told him that, I think all of us probably get phone calls, emails from people that I think are very unrealistic in the understanding of the 10th Amendment and what they want to do. They think it's a real simple process that we just sever our relationship or get rid of something, and they really, truly do not understand it's not that simple. There's things that we don't like about it, but we're on the hook for many dollars, and it's a lot simpler just to go out and rant and rave and say that we need to separate this. And so I appreciate it. And the only reason that I signed this and agreed to hear this is just what he said, that don't ask me to get involved in this unless you expect it to be done in a very rational, logical approach, that I have no intention of using this as a flag-waving venting session towards our federal government. And that's my commitment to this committee and anybody else that should this measure move on, that would be my commitment and where my support would be.
And Mr. Chairman, if you don't want to talk in too gross terms, but there are people both on the political right and political left, both states who've come at this issue from what would be described as the political right and political left, who would affirm states' powers to do certain things and make certain decisions, whether it's the state of Massachusetts bringing suit against the federal government to maintain that state's ability to uphold same-sex marriage versus other states' claims that their ability to have a more substantial role in gun laws that are more free of federal involvement.
Okay.
So I would just share that there's interest from across the political spectrum, and I think we'd be well advised to study it very carefully.
Right. Thank you. Any questions of the author? The other reason that we brought this to full committee is this is a study committee resolution, which means that it goes through an additional vetting process before it's ever really considered as to whether we want to do this. And so we typically do not bring these through subcommittee. We typically bring to full committee because there's more additional hurdles beyond the scope of this committee. So with that, I'll be happy to answer or offer any questions. Representative Brockway?
Yes, thanks,
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Chairman. So, Representative Setzler, do you foresee that this committee, or would it be up to the committee to produce a comprehensive report, say like the Special Counsel on Tax Reform did, or would you just let it flow however the members of this committee want to do it? Or what would you envision on that?
Thank you for the question. I would certainly envision a report. What this resolution calls for is the formation of a 5-person committee from the House. It's expected this would work with a Senate committee that would be empowered with the same powers to work in tandem. I would certainly anticipate a report. It doesn't mandate one, but it does say that if one's going to be produced from this, it wouldn't be an indefinite study committee. That report would be delivered by December 31st of 2011, and the committee would stand resolved then, or dissolved then.
Thank you.
And to the learned representative, just to clarify, there are times when we pass bills that have 5 days or 6 days or whatever, but it's determined at the final minute that 1 or 2 days or 3 days or whatever are allotted. So just want to clarify that. And yes, Chairman.
A couple of questions. How many times, how frequently do you think, how much testimony might this committee take in order to reach its conclusions? Because I noticed that the committee members receive per diems. I'm just wondering how much this is going to cost to conduct this study.
Good question. I can tell you, to the extent I'm in any way in a leadership role here, it would be conducted in a way very similar to the study committee I chaired back in 2006. We typically had full-day meetings. We'd meet about 9 or 10 and be in until 4 or 5. I don't believe study committees are doing the job they've been called to do if they meet for 2 hours, if they move around the state for various reasons. I would anticipate having 6 to 8 hours of hard testimony and committee work in having convened as a committee for every day that's contemplated here. In addition to that, I would anticipate non-committee day work to work through things, to have conference calls, have meetings, and those kind of things. So I would anticipate, again, 6 to 8 hours a day of testimony for each day that's contemplated in the resolution.
But and I know you can't give me a firm estimate, but there are, what, 5 members?
Yes.
At $171, something like that a day. So you're talking about $800 a day.
Correct. Plus
mileage. And so how many days are we talking about? Is this going to cost us $5,000, $10,000, $15,000?
The study committee has contemplated 5 days here. To the point of the chairman, that's certainly the will of the committee. If there's a desire to scale that back, I would submit to you, given the subject matter, it's going to take more than 2 or 3 days. It's going to take more than 2 days to do this well. I think 3 to 5 is where you'd want to be. My expectation is that to do this really well, you'd need to consider state actions in other states. You need to have a day looking at case law. You need to have a day looking at strategic litigation, things that have been done in other states. I would offer the committee you need to have at least 3 days to do this right, but 5 would be ideal.
All right. My second question is, and you've mentioned a couple, like the gun issues in other states, and I presume that you're maybe really referring to those states that have passed legislation that says that, if it's manufactured in the state, then, it's not subject to the Commerce Clause, manufactured and sold in the state. And are those the kinds of things that will be considered by the committee for maybe making recommendations regarding proposed legislation?
Thanks for the question. Couple things. There's Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution talks about how interstate compacts are used in ways that have the effect of federal law. There's a public safety compact in place that stands now that states have used before to, again, provide a federal-like level of impact in the states that are members of the compact. I would anticipate looking at the vehicle of interstate compacts as a mechanism, and specific issues might include things like environmental policy. The Supreme Court ruled a few years back that CO2 is able to be regulated by EPA, but the proposition that energy policy would be directed from Washington, and commercial policy, tax policies, those kind of things could potentially be directed through purely regulatory, non-statutory means at the federal level, in my mind, is an issue that would bear investigation, that perhaps states through interstate compacts could address the concerns in a way that could be meaningful in forestalling what I would argue could be a federal takeover of energy policy, and have a hugely detrimental effect on our economy if a cap and trade regime is mandated not through federal law but through federal regulations. So the issue of federal regulations versus interstate compacts and state powers is, I think, very relevant to us. Education policy, something that I shared, are there prescriptions that are tied to dollars that have over time had the effect of federal law, federal mandates? Those kinds of things, I think, would be before the committee.
Thank you.
Representative Oliver.
I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the Speaker allowed any study committees last year based on financial concerns. And in past years, there's also, every once in a while, there's a prohibition totally. And a number of times, the study committee days have been limited to a certain number of days, below 5. I don't have an opinion about whether leadership will allow study committees next summer or not, but would you be open to an amendment that would reduce the number of days from 5 to 3? Would you agree or disagree with such an amendment?
I'd submit to the lady, I think there'd be a noticeable impact on the committee, but I think I think the committee could do its job in 3 days. I think anything less than 3 days would jeopardize the mission.
Of course, the committee is free to meet every day of the year they want. It's the issue is reimbursement.
Indeed.
So you would be accepting of an amendment that would limit reimbursement per diems to 3 days?
Again, I think 5's ideal. I think 3 would be acceptable.
Any other questions of the author? Okay. Representative Powell, the other side of the Powell caucus. I believe you're on. 17?
Now I am. The only concern I have, and I mean, this has seen a lot of resolutions, study resolutions, representatives come through over the years, but, quite frankly, there's a lot of the resolutions that do a specific thing that we know is going to prompt a specific bill or public policy. And I certainly understand this issue. But would we not be better served knowing the budgetary restraints that we have right now, that if this passes forward, that those people who are appointed to serve on this study committee, that they would do so at their own time and own expense? Would you have any opposition to basically us letting folks, if they want to be on this committee and they can serve, do it with their committee of 1 days or such as that?
Well, thank you for the question. I would submit it really gets back to the proposition, we in the General Assembly, are we compensated for our expenses? Are we compensated for our service? Certainly, I think all of us recognize that if the only way to address important issues required people meeting on their own dime, their own committee of 1 days, are the members of the legislature prepared to do that? I'm sure they are. I think this gets back to the issue of should we be compensated for non-session committee days if it's a standing committee, and if this is an issue that we think is worthy of study, should there not be some compensation? It's really a philosophical question.
Any other questions, Representative Powell?
No.
Thank you. Let me, the chair would like to make a clarifying remark that I think to be true, and the rules chairman is here, so he certainly can, since he has a lot of experience as rules chairman, he can clarify that. But it's my understanding, that study committees end up being bundled in rules, and part of that bundling includes a determination as to the amount of money that's want to be expended. And so typically I think that's where if they decide they want to go from 5 days to 3 days or 3 days to 1 day, or this resolution passes and this one does not, it's typically handled in rules. And so that doesn't mean that that an amendment's not appropriate, but I think that's the way. Does the rules chairman have are you far enough along in the process to be able to respond to that?
I can respond.
Or what are you, 24?
Yes. Or 66. I don't know which one it is. My understanding is that as the chairman of this committee, you can name your own committee, a study committee. without having to go through rules, the thing I would suggest to you and the author is that it's my understanding there's not a lot of money to pay for study committees this year. This year probably worse than the last two. It wouldn't hurt to put it in there. They're normally done after the 30th day to see where we are as far as appropriations and if there is money in there to do it. I would suggest that maybe you just kind of ride out here for a little while and let's see, but you can put it in at any time, and it's up to you. But if there's money not there and you still want to do it, I think you have the authority to have a study committee that you name yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it very much. Any other questions or comments? Representative
Seltzer. As a constitutional scholar, I appreciate your endeavors on this, but I would like for you to answer, do you think James Madison was compensated a per diem when he participated in this process?
And I would urge the author to use a very brief answer.
Yeah, yes or no would suffice.
I wouldn't want to speculate. I would not.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this piece of legislation?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just one last wrap up.
One last brief comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just say that there is an interest in our legislature to bring legislation addressing these kinds of issues. I think having a committee formalized, whether it's funded or not, is important to kind of be a clearinghouse that leadership can encourage members to go through to make sure things are vetted and things are done in a professional way that's in keeping with the kind of work we'd want to put forward. So I just would offer that to the committee for consideration.
Thank you very much. If there's a motion, this would be the time for someone to offer it.
I make a motion to do pass.
We have a motion to do pass, House Resolution 153. Is there a second? Second. There's a second. Is there any discussion or Representative or Chairman Bearden?
Due to these financial restraints, I'd like to make an amendment to the bill or to the resolution.
This is the appropriate time.
Line 36, page 2. I'm stealing your idea down there. I think we're going to move it from 5 days to 3 days. If they want to come in additional days on their own expense, that'll be fine, but strike the word 5, insert the word 3, put a period at the end of days, and strike unless additional days are authorized. So it will basically state, starting line 35, allowances authorized with this resolution shall not be received by any member of the committee for more than 3 days, period.
Okay, we have a motion, an amendment, a motion and a second that strikes the word 5 on line 36, replaces it with 3, and then strikes unless additional days are authorized in the period. And we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the amendment? We do that now?
This is proper time.
Proper time.
I would like to propose that on line 33, after the period after the word recommendation, to strike that language from that point through line 38.
Okay, we have a motion and a second that basically strikes all language beyond the period on line 33 down through 38. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And we have a second.
And if I may state why this is, one is because of the fiscally austere times that we're having, and that while I put a sizable amount of importance into what the representative is doing, and I'm afraid that if there's a cost factor involved in this, that this may be the last time we see this proposition in front of us.
Okay. So to clarify, with the author of that amendment, what you're basically doing is defunding, everything's intact, but you're defunding the
What
proposition.
What would happen if that is taken out, in my mind, is that there would be a House Study Committee that would be created. And those members that would be appointed to that committee would be appointed knowing that they would be serving on their own dime. But it would also mean that this study committee would still carry the full weight of a House Study Committee.
Okay. I fully understand and agree with the stated intent of that amendment. Do you have a comment?
I'm going to just clarify your statement a little bit or ask you a question. I don't believe that if we eliminated the per diem for any specific days in your amendment, which I support or vote for, that it would end the right of an individual member to claim a committee of one day in the procedure. So if someone felt a need for that reimbursement, he or she would be entitled to ask for it, and he or she can make that decision independent of...
Exactly correct.
Right.
Okay.
And I would further say, not that the chairman would do that, but the chairman of this committee would also have the authority, I'm assuming, to consider that to make it a committee day for those members as well as the rest of the committee,
yes,
if the chairman so decided.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. So we have a stated amendment and a second discussed. Any other questions? All those in favor of this amendment say aye. All those opposed? The amendment passes, which makes the previous amendment moot. So now we have before the committee LC 943790 as amended, or by substitute. That's before, which has been properly moved and seconded. Do we have any further discussion on the resolution as before us? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Committee substitute passes as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Let's take before us House Bill 262. Chairman Bearden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 262, as we stated in the subcommittee, came about from talking with the Judicial Qualifying Commission on how to assist them in the budget matters. And out of the several comments made, one of the things we came up with is to add a 1% fee to the judicial qualifying fees. We will take them from 3% up to 4%. That 1% would go back to the general funds. And the most important part of this bill, as you go through lines 2 and 3, just lines out the judges, and it's all the judges that would be affected on that 1% increase on the qualifying fees. But on page 4, lines 114 through lines 125, it's the legislative intent portion of this bill that states that these fees should be used for the Judicial Qualifying Commission and its operations. So that's how the bill came about, and that's what the bill is for. And as for favorable consideration, I'd be more happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? And we have the other end of the Powell caucus.
Would the gentleman tell me about how much money this is expected to raise?
I appreciate you asking. I believe it raised somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $175,000.
Per year or per election cycle?
Election cycle. That's where it should be.
Any other follow-up questions?
Do we need to talk back in the office suite?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Any other questions of the author on this measure? Having no other questions, what's the will of the people?
Do we have all of the elected judges?
Correct. We do.
President Powell, do you have a question for the committee? Can you say it so we can all hear, please?
I'm asking, do we have, are all of the judges, are we sure we've got all elected judges?
Yes, sir, I believe we do.
The state court, excuse me, not state, appointed judges, Do they also fall under the under this body? The JQC.
They do fall under the JQC, but they are not elected, so they would not have a qualifying fee. They're appointed, such as the magistrate judges. The chief magistrate can appoint a magistrate judge, and I have a bill at 4 p.m. to do something else for that, but that's a different story.
I guess what I'm asking then is this premature because we might have some more we want to lasso and put under this.
No, we're good at this point. Talking and working closely with the JQC, this is something that will really assist them on doing their job, which is basically policing the 1,800 judges throughout the state.
Addressing the other end of the Powell caucus, and you can't be the left end of the Powell caucus, but you've got municipal court judges, you've got associate magistrate court judges, you've got non-elected appointed judges who do not run for office and they do not pay a qualifying fee. So even though they are supervised by JQC, they would not fall under the funding of the JQC that elected judges would do.
These future plans that y'all are looking at in other bills, have y'all come up with an idea? Should they not also be paying into this since they're going to be, their professional conduct is going to be oversaw by the JQC?
But this is tied to qualifying fees. If they do not run for office, there are no qualifying fees.
I guess what I'm asking, have we looked at the other way that they could also be contributing to this?
As a former municipal court judge who got paid $300 a month, I would resent having to pay 1% into anything.
Then I will back off of this questioning to the left wing of the Powell caucus.
Great. Any other questions on this measure? All right. What's the will of the committee?
I'm about to make my own motion.
Yeah, I make a motion that we...
What number?
18, sir.
Yes,
I make
go
a
ahead.
motion that we do pass LC 285530.
We have a motion and second on House Bill 262 LC 285530. Any additional discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition say nay.
Mr. Rules, Chairman, that would be in front of the committee tomorrow morning.
That statement's out of order. The motion almost passed, but I'm not sure. No, the motion passes and it does go on to rules. Thank you very much. We have before us House Bill 124. House Bill 124, which is a measure brought to y'all by the chairman, LC 285399. This was brought to me. This was one of those rare, scary moments, with no disrespect whatsoever to my friends in ACCG or GMA, but they both came together and asked for this, so it's got to be a great bill, right, since they both want it? It's also worth noting that in addition to your chairman being the author, we have both of the Powell caucuses listed on here as supporting of this. So talk about some kind of support between ACCG, GMA, and the Powell caucus. This has got to be a great bill. What this, all seriously, what this bill does, it was brought to me that there's inconsistencies on per diem, and that what they wanted to do was come up with a consistent amount to pay per diem on these arbitration panels that go forth, and the $115 was the number that they brought forth plus mileage. And so I bring it before the committee and ask what the will of the committee is. Any questions? What's the will of the committee then?
Make a motion to pass.
We have a motion and do pass.
Second.
And we have a second. Any other discussion? Hearing no other discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That is the only other measure that we plan to vote on, but I'm going to take this opportunity to bring before a measure that I have in this committee. And the purpose of this, of bringing it forth to the committee, is to just make light of a particular bill that I drafted and also the purpose of this bill. And I hope that as people watch this all over, they can take heed to some of the statements that I'm making. House Bill 109. House Bill 109. As a legislator, we receive input, both positive and negative, all the time on particular pieces of legislation. And of course, when we say legislation, the budget process is a piece of legislation, whether it be the supplemental budget or the big budget is a piece of legislation. And I drafted this bill because, quite honestly, in these very, very difficult times that we face right now, where we've got communities as well as the state continuing saying we don't have enough money, we're out of funds. Quite honestly, I've reached a point where I've become very tired of having employees of the government, whether it be the cities, the counties, whether it be the school systems, whatever it might be, lobbying me for additional money while they're being paid by the taxpayers. And so examples are, I receive, and there's a value, I think, in that. We have a number of state employees down here that wear the badge. They're registered lobbyists, and they do it the right way. They have issues. Now, that's a total different thing of whether taxpayer dollars should be used for that, but they do it under current law. They do it the right way. They come, they register. We know full well that they're there to pass legislation or oppose legislation. But we've got a lot of people that instead of doing their job that the taxpayers are funding, they choose to use emails, they choose to use computer systems, they choose to use telephone services, they choose to use faxes, letterhead, you name it. Postage, copy machines to support and oppose legislation. And I philosophically have a challenge. I have a very difficult understanding of how, and I'll just pick one, no particular reason, but I have a very difficult time when a teacher in the middle of the day on school property picks up the telephone and calls me while I can hear the intercom in the background complaining about we don't fund more money for teachers. And you can take that and take it across the board to whatever level of employee it is. And so the purpose of this bill, and of course when I talk to, whether it be the school superintendents or the chairman of the commission or whoever it might be, you know, they will say things like, well, we have a policy against that. And to me, it's kind of like the federal border, then enforce it. And so I'm telling you right now, my commitment has been to the school systems that have approached me, to the county commissioners that have approached me, to the mayors, the city councilmen, all those that have approached me in concern over legislation, House Bill 109. My response is very simple. Make it go away, control it with policy so that we don't have to create larger government, which I oppose, because you won't do your job in maintaining the employees to do their job. If they want to call me after hours, if they want to call me from their cell phone, if they want to send an email to me on their own personal email, great, bring it on. The exception in this bill are elected officials. If a county commissioner wants to do it, fine. He's elected by the people. He can take whatever he or she can take whatever stance they want to. If a school board member wants to do it, great. They're elected by the citizens of that community, and they should be able to do that. If a school superintendent wants to do it, or a county manager wants to do it, register as a lobbyist. And this bill has that provision also. It gives them the ability that if they want to become a lobbyist, fine, register as a lobbyist. But I'm not mad, I'm not upset. But I've just reached the point, this is my 5th year down here, and I'm really tired. A recent example, might I use a name? We have the chairman of an appropriations subcommittee here that received a letter several weeks ago, paid for. That letter, that envelope, that postage, probably the computer that wrote the letter, probably everything involved in it was written from a local government asking for more money. And I just have a problem. If they want to get in the business or hire lobbyists to do that, then that's their prerogative. Under current law, they can do that. But I've reached a point that I'm tired of the lobbying activities that are going on by government employees that should be doing their job versus do this. Now, let me say the other side of the story. I don't want to pass this legislation because let me tell you why. Because many of them do it the right way. Let me make sure you understand that. There are many teachers that do call after hours or on weekends. There are many hardworking county employees, city employees, state employees that do it the right way. They go through the channels or they go to their elected officials, and their elected officials deal with us. And I think that's the right way to do that. So here's my statement, pure and simple. Make this problem go away. Enforce your policies, create your policies so that this type of legislation is not necessary, and that would be great. But if not, not just myself, but many others are really growing tired of this. And I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you for the opportunity for me to say all that. And I will offer, I don't know if anybody on the committee has a comment or a question, but my intention right now is to not move any further with this legislation as long as this thing goes away. So, all right, thank you. I've said my bit. Any other things that need to come before? I'm sorry? Yeah, it's good to be chairman. Anything else that needs to be said for this committee? Thank you all for your time. Thank you for moving so many measures out of here. Y'all have a great week. Meeting adjourned.